this is probably what we would like to develop through the debate, through the interaction. It represents the first step in what should allow us to be more attentive to the local dimension and to be more supportive of local development in both the use of the geographic and the thematic lines of assistance. I have, in order, so what exactly a territorial approach to local development is basically a policy framework, is a way of thinking about what does it mean to promote local development, how do we think about local development, and what can we do to promote it. So we have to, in order to do that, we have to make one step back and start with an understanding of decentralization. This is important because we have been talking about decentralization for over 20 years now, and there's been a lot of discussion of the concept. But much of this discussion has been the domain of the fiscal decentralization experts, and has been framed by this disciplinary perspective. A very useful thing, but something that might have missed key elements of the concept, which are very important for operations. So, the first thing to do is to move from the classic definition of decentralization, the one that any fiscal decentralization expert would give you if you ask, which is that decentralization is a public sector reform intended to transfer responsibility, resources, and authority from higher to lower level government. Is this definition wrong? No, it's not. It's right. Is this definition complete? No, it's not. And it actually could be misleading. Decentralization has been more recently, even in the field of fiscal decentralization, you would have the so-called second or third generation fiscal decentralization literature telling you a different story than the original one, telling you that decentralization is essentially a political process of empowerment of people through their local government over the public sector, through the empowerment of their own local government. Now that changes the perspective, obviously, because it moves from an understanding of decentralization as a process internal to the state, to the administration of the state, the architecture of the state, to a process which brings in the less administrative and more political understanding. In fact, to empower people through their local government, we also have to rethink local governments, because local governments must be recognized as political actors, self-government mechanism of a local political constituency, and not just managerial entities for delivery of a specific set of services. Now, in many administrative traditions, particularly the Anglo-Saxon tradition, local authorities are creatures of statute. They are there to do the job that the higher level of government wants them to do. they are essentially understood as managerial entities in charge of a specific set of services whose responsibilities is delegated or devolved to them by the central or the regional government. Elsewhere, fortunately, in other administrative traditions, European and so on, fortunately, we have a different and broader understanding, which is now filtering into the administrative tradition, the Anglo-Saxon administrative tradition. You just have to think of what is happening in England, for example, with the introduction of the concept of general competence for local authorities. So we have this understanding of local government as actors that have a double mandate. Local government is always two things, always two hats. On one end, it has specific functions which are attributed to it by the central government, which has to deliver, which has to fulfill. But it has also a general mandate for the welfare of the citizens. So it has what is, as I said in England, is now being called the principle of general competence. It has a general competence. And what is a general competence? What does it mean, a general mandate? A general mandate means that basically a local authority can do whatever they want, as long as they don't break the law and don't impinge on responsibilities that have been specifically and exclusively assigned to other bodies, to other entities within the state. And you will be hard pressed to find responsibilities which are exclusively assigned. Think, for example, of rural roads. These are assigned to the Ministry of Public Works or to the Ministry of Rural Development or I don't know. But are they exclusively assigned? No. Many local authorities do. Actually, it's one of the very first things that they do when they have a little money. They build rural roads. And so on and so forth. They could go on and on. If you want to empower this local government, you have to develop you have to develop your local authority system based on two principles: autonomy and accountability. And why these are absolutely essential? Because if you don't have autonomy, and there are many decentralization reform processes which are called decentralization reform process, which actually give very little autonomy to local authorities. If you don't have autonomy, you reduce the ability of the local authority to realize efficiency gain in the use of public resources, which is what is expected from decentralization reform, and you impede resource mobilization, additional resource mobilization for local development. In other terms, if you don't give local autonomy to local authorities, you are basically saying that you don't care about the efficiency gain that they could realize on your resources, on the central state resources, and you don't care about them bringing additional resources to bear on your national effort. That you are content with your handling of development and neither need their help to improve the efficiency of your resources, nor you need their help to give you additional resources. So you're basically renouncing the benefits of local development if you don't give autonomy. Without autonomy, if you decentralize without autonomy, you are basically renouncing setting the stage for not producing any local development. Second, you need accountability, of course, because without accountability you increase the risk of local government out of control. Macroeconomic imbalances, territorial disparities, inefficient public investment. I was recently in Vietnam and I could witness, firsthand what it means to give local autonomy under political pressure without the ability and without the setup of a system of accountability. All of a sudden, all the provinces there want their deep sea port, their university, and they are creating a serious problem for public investment management to the central state. You also increase the risk of capture of local governance by local elites. Finally, the state actually, in a decentralization process without proper accountability mechanism, the state is basically giving up resources of its own that could have been used more effectively for development and are less effectively used. Now, however, if you want to, if you have a system of local authorities with autonomy and accountability, you want also to develop the local governance institution, which are what is needed to translate the empowerment of local government into the empowerment of the people. In other terms, to comply with the original definition. And I will try to go quickly because otherwise we will not. So these are institutions that empower citizen, direct democracy provision, citizen charters, all things that institution for monitoring performance, institution, and this is particularly important, that enable local government to perform as facilitators of a network of providers. In other terms, not just as the only party responsible for delivering services, but promote active citizen, self-help initiatives, and so on and so forth. Okay. Then we can come to the definition of local development itself in this perspective. Local development is, and this is absolutely critical, is not development that happens locally. In the expression local development, the word local does not refer to the where, it refers to the who and the how. Essentially, local development, it consists in the leveraging of place-specific resources through enabling political and institutional mechanisms. This makes local development very different from the localization of development. And local development is not just the localization of development. And I remember I was once in Nicaragua talking about the localization of the MDG with a group of mayors. And one mayor stood up and asked, but whose objectives are these MDGs? They are not the objective of the locality. They are not even the objective of the state. They were global objectives, right? Which were being localized. There is nothing wrong with localizing those objectives, as long as this is accepted, is integrated with the other side of the story, which is the pursuing of genuinely local objectives. And again, we come to that to those two sides of local development, localizing national programs and projects and developing own policies and projects, which, however, the distinction must be must be kept very clear. Now, local development itself, understood this way, understood as the mobilization of local resources, is not a new concept. It started in the early 80s and has gone through a process of evolution. That's why today we can talk about territorial development as local development that has these four basic characteristics, two of which were the original, the characteristic on which originally the emphasis was, which were endogenous and incremental. In other terms, local development mobilize local resources and bring them to bear on the national development effort as an incremental, as an additional set of resources. And you know, to understand this endogeneity and incrementality of local development is critical. And I remember that, and we have not done a very good job, for example, with the ministries of finance. I remember to whom we were talking in many cases in the frame of decentralization reforms, because we were not able to articulate the fact that local development was not asking for more money from them. It was asking the opportunity to give them more resources. And if we had been able to do that, probably certain resistances to decentralization reforms and fiscal decentralization reforms of a certain kind would have been diminished. But in time, to these two fundamental characteristics of endogeneity and incrementality, two other features have been added. The multiscalarity and spatial integration, the recognition that local development, focusing on local development doesn't mean localism. Focusing on local development means recognizing the multiscalar nature of development, the need to bring together both public and private authorities at different spatial level. And then the importance of spatial integration. Local development calls for the ability to integrate multiple sectors, multiple intervention through a spatial vision of development at the territorial level. So today, in my sense is of the concept of local development is that a bit more, it has grown up and is a bit more than the original emphasis on endogeneity and incrementality, and you can add to it these two. Yeah. And I've gone through it already. This table is an old table, comes from a publication by Jeff Brugman, who asked one day which authority has greatest advantage in delivering sustainable development. And it compares local authority to state agencies, private sector, NGO, and civil society organizations. In terms of the institutional qualities required to promote local development, and finds that the local authority is the one that has all of them, this potential. Now we can go to the famous TALD and the territorial approach to local development. As I say, it is a policy framework, and it's basically the need for it is the simple recognition that attempts that to go from decentralization reforms to local development and poverty reduction, there are many intermediate steps. There are many things that can happen. But first of all, that decentralization reforms are essentially the product of political processes, of political pressures, both national and local, and therefore that there can be the decentralization reforms can be just part of a political agenda, and they may be implemented for reasons that have nothing to do with development, in spite of the rhetoric that is usually attached to decentralization reforms in terms of development. So it's important to recognize the two agendas. There is nothing wrong with the political agenda of decentralization, the attempts through it to improve local government, but for the purpose of political stability, of survival of the regime, and so on and so forth, which in itself may have a positive effect on poverty reduction. Political instability is not good for poverty either. So there's nothing wrong with that, but that if you want decentralization to also have contribute to poverty reduction through local development, you need a national political commitment to the concept of local development. So here is the reason why we need a TALD, or the policy framework. The basic first statement is, if you have decentralization reforms, if you implement decentralization reforms, which are always driven by politics, if you may or may not have a commitment to local development, you may or may not go through. Why? Can you come back just a minute?
I'm going to go back in
you may or may not foster local development and use it for poverty reduction. So basically the issue is there a national development, a policy commitment to local development, and what is it, and how should it be, what should be the features of this policy framework? This is the question that the TALD tries to answer. The TALD tried to answer what is the content of this, what are the dimensions of this policy or policy framework that need to be there if you want to transform decentralization reforms into local development and poverty reduction. Without it, there is little chance. And in fact, many decentralization reforms do not deliver local development, not for particular, extraordinary reasons that intervene in the implementation process, but simply because they were not designed for that. There was no intention at the beginning to have, simply because the government wanted to decentralize for political reasons, but didn't believe that it had something to gain from those local governments that it was going to put in place from the point of view of development. So it was not interested in local government as developmental organization, as developmental tools. He was interested in the political role that they could play for the stabilization of the regime, for political gains. And actually, this table shows you two steps if you want to look at how decentralization reforms may lead to local development. The first thing is to recognize that decentralization reforms are driven by politics. They are not driven by developmental objectives or strategies. They are driven by politics. And the very first thing is then to ask what is the nature of the state within which these decentralization reforms are initiated. And you have a range of possibilities going from predatory states to developmental or neo-developmental states, and or a range of actual cases in between. Now, in the first case, the connection of decentralization to developmental goals will be weaker or non-existent. They are basically not being done for development, but they may be stronger connection to developmental goal in developmental states. So the very first thing is to ask, what is the nature of the state? And the second thing is, let's assume that the state is developmental, and therefore, once is committed or has understood the role that local development could have in contributing to the national development effort. Then the next question is to ask whether it envisages meaningful or non-meaningful local autonomy. In the first case, if it doesn't envisage meaningful autonomy for local authorities, the best it could achieve is the localization of its national programs and policies. And even that, I would say that even that would be difficult. But in other terms, it will probably not gain much, but it will now lose, and it will be able to localize. Only in the second case, because of what we said before about the role of autonomy, only in the second case, the decentralization reform may lead to a substantial additional effect of local development. Precisely because you provide that autonomy that does these two tricks. It improves the efficiency of the central resources, and it mobilizes additional resources. Okay. But then the question is, okay, local development could do this, but why do we want it? Why should we use that kind of avenue of local development? Why this should be an important part of the national development strategy? And there you have another set of questions, which is whether or not the government is concerned with spatial inequalities and or committed to eliminating those spatial inequalities. Now, government may not be too concerned about that, and even they received advice from international organizations not to be too concerned about spatial inequality. If you just remember the World Development Report of the World Bank in 2009, basically the message was, why care about spatial imbalances? They are the price you're paying for development. Just forget about it. Now, we are in 2014, and so it's 5 years later. But 5 years later, the picture is very different from 2009. And 5 years later, people are starting to realize that spatial inequalities are not only bad for social cohesion, they are bad also for growth. And therefore, the argument is turning in the other direction, that maybe we should be concerned about spatial inequalities, and we should try to correct them. Maybe the problem was with how we did it, and what were the policies, the instruments that we were using to do it. But that that we should anyway do it. I think that you wanted me to talk.
Yeah, maybe if you can wrap up in 5 minutes.
In 5 minutes, yes. I think that actually I will just show this and then jump to the last few slides. Okay, this is nothing that you don't know already, that you have not, considered already. It's an attempt to put together what you need if you really want. Let's assume that you are in developmental state, that you are willing to provide some level of autonomy to local authorities. that you have a concern with spatial inequalities and want to see a more balanced, national developmental model. What should you do? What is the policy framework that you should adopt? What are the components of it? And of course, you may then intervene and use any of these blocks as entry point. You cannot, you may not be able to be as comprehensive as the normative model would say. In each country, this will be adapted differently. In each country, the entry point will be different. The extent of which you can do in any of these dimensions will be different. But basically, what does this policy framework tell you? It tells you that if you want this territorial development, which we have defined as local development, which is endogenous, incremental, multi-scalar and integrated, you have to improve the management system of local development. And these are the classic 4 dimensions. You have to improve the scope of local development. In other terms, you have to understand that this is open to the general mandate and not just the specific function. Second, you have to improve the system of local development planning. We could go into it, but we don't have the time now. But essentially here the point is to recognize that local development planning is not the localization of the national plan. This is the most critical thing. And country after country where I go and I talk to people wanting to develop a local planning system, what actually they mean is how we can localize the national plan. They're not talking about local plan, about localization of the national plan, not regional plan, but regionalization of the plan, of the national plan. So this is an important element. A third element, we need to enhance and diversify the instruments of local government financing. Something has been done in terms of general purpose grants in some countries, but a lot remain to be done in terms of on-source revenue and in terms also of mechanisms dedicated to the financing of investments by local authorities. My experience, for example, in Cambodia is that these poor communes, when they have only as an instrument of financing the general purpose transfers, they use them to build roads, but this is a trickle that comes from the central state. So to build 3 kilometers of road, it takes them 3 years. By the time they are building the last kilometers, the first one has to be repaired. So it's a lot of inefficiency in financing investment through pay-as-you-go system. And therefore the importance of this, subnational investment financing instruments. Something, for example, that international community could have done a lot about long time ago. Take the social funds, for example. How long it must take for the social fund to become instruments of financing of local government plans. In Latin America, something has been done. But first of all, there is only one social fund that I know, the one in El Salvador, which has changed its name and has become the Social Fund for Local Development. All the others are still, financing community type of investments, and not to speak of Africa or Asia. So a lot could have been done long ago. We need to do. We have been playing with banks for local authorities that had no chance of accessing credit, while we were running this grant system, like the social funds for other purposes. And then, of course, we have to improve the institutional capacity for procurement for local implementation. In order to do that, two set of prerequisites. National level policies not only the decentralization policies that recognize the autonomy and the accountability, but also a new urban agenda supportive of local authorities' role in managing, you know, the urbanization challenges. And then a new national rural development. For those of you who are younger, much younger than me, don't remember that the early interest in decentralization in the 80s and the early 90s came from the discontent with the integrated rural development projects. People were looking for how we institutionalize the role of the project management units, which were managing, you know, integrated programs, and they looked all of a sudden they realized, oh yeah, maybe there are the local authorities who do that. That was the initial, you know, the initial interest in decentralization by the development communities, substantially betrayed by the lack of real empowerment of these local authorities later on. So we are back considering the project implementation unit or project management units as we were, you know, 20 years ago. Then this is national policy. At subnational level, three basic things, three main things. Effective institution for intergovernmental cooperation. We need it because once you decentralize, you transform a system. The architecture of the system is transformed in the sense that you no longer have hierarchical relations. So the line of commands are broken. Now you have autonomous, different levels of government. You have to find new ways for them to talk to each other. And since the line, the hierarchical relation are no longer and local leadership and administrative capacity. There is not much I can say about it that you don't know already. But I would like to spend some words about active citizenship and public-private partnership. It's not enough participation. It's not enough, you know, to talk about participation in public policy making. We have to go beyond participation. We have to go into active citizenship, bringing citizens and their organization into the very process of delivering the services. So into co-provision, co-production, co-design, co-provision, co-production arrangements.
Maybe
yes. Just go to the last one. I was under the impression that I had 1 hour. Implication for aid modality, scope. Implication for aid. Different options may be available to external aid. And you basically, to support the adoption of you have essentially 3 levels. You can either help developing the policy and regulatory framework, you know, the decentralization, the urban agenda, the rural development policies. You may work for strengthening institutional and building capacity at the local level, improving local public expenditure management, service delivery capacity, or you may work promoting planning and financing of sector development, social and environmental and economic. Something can be done in each of the three categories of action.
Yeah.
And you can use, of course, different modalities. Budget support, both general sector, with policy matrices. When your delegation has identified a sector and say, this is the sector where we're going to build the budget support, for which we're going to build the budget support. Ask the question, in that sector, what can be done to involve local authorities in the delivery of the services How can we involve local authorities in shaping the policy and legal environment in which they are called to operate in general, but more specifically, how can we involve them in planning and implementing sector development work through appropriate delegation and devolution arrangement? These are the questions you may want to have in the policy matrix when you negotiate budget support with the local authorities. You may want to see in the policy matrix something that say we are delegating or devolving to local authorities certain functions. Or you can provide project support, and there you have much greater latitude. With project support, you may be able to fund analytical work and practical experimentation, which generate the innovations needed. Last one.
There's no last one.
But there was a table before.
Sorry. I come to the table.
No, I just wanted to say that again, when you go into a country, you may want to assess many things, but first maybe these two things: the level of autonomy and the relevance that the territorial development has in the policy discourse. And you will find in the paper I described 3 cases which are, without giving the name, but are countries I know, which can be placed in this matrix in different places because they either have there is a certain level of autonomy for local authorities and there is a certain degree of concern with territorial development and with spatial imbalances in the national policy discourse. So, doing this kind of assessment and then looking at what are the sectors in which you are working with the government through budget support and identifying within the sector what local governments can do and how they could be associated to the development of the policy matrix, it's critical work. Equally critical is to the extent that the work you can do at that level is limited. You may want to pilot, experiment, but when you do that, still link it to the management of the budget support